Welcome to the Dash Mindset Podcast. I'm Sherry Zievenbergen. You were born, you're gonna die, and your adventure is your dash in between. So make the most of it. Unlock your potential in all aspects of your dash by embracing your uniqueness and living in a way that's authentic to you, not by doing more things, but by focusing on the right things. I'm a former corporate leader turned coach who's on my own journey, and I'm passionate about helping you on your journey too. So on the podcast, we'll explore how to live authentically by deciphering who you truly are and what you truly want. Are you ready to take a step toward designing your dash? Someday doesn't actually exist, so let's do it now. Hello, everyone. This is Sherry with the Dash Mindset, and today I am so excited to have my friend Steve Fredlund here with us. Steve is also known as the Safari Dude, and I met Steve relatively recently, so he's my new lifelong friend, which I informed him of immediately after meeting him. And so Steve is the Safari Dude because he has been on safaris, he leads safaris, and he talks about life being an epic adventure. So he's a motivational speaker, author of the book, The Unright Thing. And you need to buy it and read it immediately because it's hysterical. One of the reasons why I love Steve so much is because he's a former actuary, which you would never guess. I just love that about you, Steve. So I am going to now hand it over to Steve. So Steve, thank you so much for being here. This is so fun. And what I would love for you to do is just give a high-level overview to the audience about who you are, what you do, because I did not do it justice.
Oh, you did great, Sherry. It's great to be here. And for those of you who listen to the show, you probably had Sherry encounter you the same way she did me. Hi, Steve, you're my new best friend. I'm like, okay, sweet. But it works. It's true. It's been fantastic. As you mentioned, I'm a recovering actuary. I guess I did that for about 25 years, even though I don't think I ever should have been an actuary. So kind of high level, my story is really one of always trying to do things right as other people defined it. You know, hey, I was good at math, so you should study math, you should go to college, you should do all of these things. And so what happened is it created this very good life for me on paper, but inwardly I was miserable. So for quite a while, I was had these two lives going. I had this life that looked really good and really polished and really successful. And inwardly, I just kept getting more and more unhappy. And then I guess about the early winter of 2018, I guess is when I had my anxiety attack, which I'd never had before. I've never had since, but just this period of forcing me to reevaluate some things. And that's when I came to the realization that I was really living somebody else's life. And so the last 6 years or so has really been this journey of trying to figure out who am I really, and what do I want to do in this world, and how do I want to interact with the world and with other people. And as you mentioned, this has culminated in doing more inspirational, motivational keynote speaking. So that has really been what I've enjoyed over the last couple of years, and just loved doing it, and had a chance to meet some great people like you, Sherry.
I'm so glad you're a recovering actuary and that you're doing speaking now instead.
And the greatest compliment you could ever give me is to say, I didn't, you're surprised that I was an actuary. That's a great compliment. So thank you.
And hey, I love actuaries, just so you know. I mean, I've worked with a lot of actuaries. They're great people. I just was surprised that you were one.
Right. They are great people. They're wonderful people. They're serious people. They're necessary people. They have more impact in the world than most people realize. But at the end of the day, I think I was never really supposed to be one.
Yes. Oh, that's a good way to put it. Just like I wasn't supposed to be an accountant.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny how that works. Okay. So I need to add that. So when I saw Steve's presentation, it was at our friend Lisa Eben's event, and she deliberately seated me next to Steve, knowing that we were going to be besties. So thank you to Lisa. Shout out to Lisa.
Lisa.
So okay, Lisa. Okay, so let's talk about The Unright Thing. Let's talk about your book, Steve. Yeah. And when I say let's, I'm going to let you talk about your book a little bit.
Yeah. You're going to have some coffee while I talk about it. Well,
that's right. I'm just going to sit back.
Right, exactly. Enjoy yourself. Take a nap. I think, one of the things as I was kind of unpacking what happened to me and how did I get where I was in this place of feeling miserable, even though I had this really good life on paper and kind of this whole juxtaposition. There's a number of things that kind of emerged as themes that I realized this is what's causing my unhappiness, and this is what in turn could cause my happiness. And one of those things was realizing how much I'd worked my entire life to try to do the right thing, as other people defined it. So the right thing for me, as I mentioned, was study math because I was good at math. So the right thing to do is go to college. The right thing to do is become an actuary. The right thing to do is get married. The right thing to do is have kids. The right thing to do is buy a house. The right thing to do is volunteer. The right thing to do is give money. And so I was constantly sort of searching out what the right thing to do was based on what society or the norms or, what I should do. And so I worked really hard to curate a life where I was doing all of the right things. And one of the things I realized 6 years ago was how much I had done that, but also how much joy I had found when I actually allowed myself to do the unright thing. Not necessarily the wrong thing, but the unright thing in terms of the eyes of what the world would say is the right thing to do. Things like playing soccer with kids instead of getting to a meal on time, those kinds of things. And so I started really unpacking my whole life and started reflecting on my whole life in that way. And that's what ultimately became this book. It's a memoir. It's called Do the Unright Thing, a memoir of a people pleaser, because that's what I was, which makes it even harder. And so it just kind of sort of unpacks those stories of where I did the right thing instead of really choosing the thing that was aligned with my heart and who I really was deep down and who I'd always been. And then I guess the journey to starting to choose the unright thing, to do those things that other people wouldn't necessarily say is the right thing, but they were the right thing for me. So in a sense, the book kind of ushers in this new idea of who gets to define what the right thing is, because so many of us allow the outside world, the outside influences to define what the right thing is, when in fact we have the power, we have the agency to really define what the right thing is for us. And so the book is hopefully, as you mentioned, it's funny. There's some stories from my past, but the goal is not just to be writing, hey, here's what happened to me. The idea is hopefully the reader can find themselves in it and maybe, give permission to start pursuing the unright thing in their own lives.
Oh my gosh, you're right. I didn't feel like, I'm reading a book about Steve. I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm reading a book about myself in a lot of ways. So I never played the trombone, and I already told you this, Steve, but your trombone incident that you wrote about in the book was just so relatable, whether someone was in band or not. I mean, we can all relate to just the awkwardness of junior high and the fact that my son is in junior high right now. And itself is painful because I think, oh gosh, I remember back. Right. So your book is just so relatable because we've all had these awkward moments throughout our lives where we think, okay, I just got to keep doing the right thing, whatever the heck that is. It's just what we believe is the right thing based upon what society is saying without actually even saying it. Right.
It's funny you say that.
I love your book.
So many people talk about the trombone story, first of all, because it's kind of this graphic story of throwing up into a trombone. So there's some funny in there, but you're right, because people say, I relate to that because we all have those moments where we're either hyper embarrassed as a kid or we just want to, crawl under a rock and die, which was also the case. In my case, I literally quit band that day. Like that was it. That was the end of my band career. Like that was it. I'm like, I can't go back. I told my mom, I know we can't do this, but we need to move, or you need to homeschool me or something. Like I can't go back to the school. It was so terrible, so we all kind of have those moments. But yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because that is the idea, that you're reading this fun story, but you're also going, yeah, that's me. That's my story.
And you know what? Okay. You say that because, and talk about how we have these awkward moments as kids where we just think, okay, I'm going to have to be homeschooled, or I'm just going to have to get my GED, whatever it takes. I just can't go back to that. I have to add a story, something that happened to me in my adult life that made me think, okay, I'm just going to have to quit my job. So I first went into public accounting, and I was an auditor. So I went to, and I'm just, I'm wearing a suit, acting like I know what's going on, right? And I'm 23, whatever. And I go to this bank it's my first day on this audit. And it's this big bank with this huge lobby and a staircase going down the stairs. And I am walking down the staircase, Steve, and I fall.
No.
And I'm a so-called adult at this point because I'm in my 20s. I'm there to audit their books. And, they're supposed to feel comfortable in my competence. Yet I can't walk down the stairs. So even in adulthood, we have those moments, right? And, they didn't ask me to leave. I still audited. But it was so horrifying. I just thought, I'm just going to, I don't know, do I leave the company? Do I just leave this particular audit? Do I move back to Iowa?
It felt like you start second guessing, am I even okay to be an accountant? Like, I mean, you just fell down the stairs and everybody else, if that happens to somebody else, if it happens to somebody else, you just kind of laugh. You're like, oh no, them poor person, I hope they're okay. But when it happens to you, you reassess your life in those moments.
Yes. I mean, but we feel bad for the other person when it's not us. Yes. But when it's us, we're reassessing our entire life. Yeah.
That's exactly it. I tell you what, so I was going to try this whole speaking thing out, right? And I'm surprised I even became a speaker at one point, because my first big thing I was going to do is I was going to do the TEDx in Edina, Minnesota. So I got through their initial assessment thing where you send in a video, and then they had the tryouts. And each person you had to do like 3 minutes of your talk. And there's, 30 of us there or something like that in the room. I went up there, I said about 10 seconds, and then I forgot everything. Like, I forgot my whole world. I forgot I had a brain. I forgot everything. And I locked up. I had nothing to say. And they're like so gracious. They're like, take your time. And I'm like, I told them, I said, I got nothing. I said, I got nothing. Here's what I did. I'm like, Sherry, I'm like 50 years old. Okay. I'm not 12. Here's what I do. I walk out of the room. I don't say a word. I walk out of the room through the parking lot to my car. There's one woman who's like chasing after me. Steve, come back. We'll give you another shot. I don't even turn around. I keep walking to my car. I drive off, and I never respond to another email. I was so mortified, and I'm like, I'll never be a speaker. Who does? I mean, I'm 50 years old and I'm acting like I'm 12 because it's just, I think all of those emotions come back and like, what am I doing? The self-doubt. How could I do this? I'm so embarrassed. They got to just be in there just all laughing at me. It was just so terrible.
Oh, I love that story so much. So much. And everyone relates to that, right? Where you just have this moment that I don't think I can ever even have a conversation with another human being. I'm just not equipped for that, right?
That's where I go to that dark place. I'm like, well, I know I could never be a speaker now. I can never do TEDx. I can never be a speaker. I should just go get a job. I mean, in those brief millisecond of a moments, you realize I am not an adequate human being. Oh.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, I love that story so much. But then you did ultimately do a TED Talk. You did two, right? Do I have that right?
I did two TED Talks, and I've become a professional speaker. And I think, I could go up there and tell you, oh, see, you can overcome your obstacles, which you can. But I think, so I'm very proud of myself for continuing on in that journey because I just love it so much. But yeah, the point is that we connect with that, right? We connect with those kinds of stories because we've all been there, whether we admit it or not. I think almost everybody, if not everybody, has had those moments of, am I actually okay? Like, I've gone through periods of my life, like this is no joke. I've gone through periods of my life a couple of different times where I honestly, I'm not being funny here. I honestly thought that I was mentally slow. Like I had and everybody around me was just being really nice to me. Like I thought, I thought like I was, really low IQ because I just had so much self-doubt that I really, I thought I was being cared for by people who were just being really nice to me by saying nice things to me, even though I was mentally really slow. And, I mean, what the heck?
Oh, I love that so much. And it's especially funny because I have absolutely had those times. And I do think though that, okay, so I have an accounting background from way back when. If you asked me to do anything accounting related, I just don't know if I could. But I think in general, actuaries, accountants, we just process differently, and we don't just, in general, just blurt things out, right? I mean, like I know that I used to hate it in class when we were supposed to do something right then.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to just take my time, be alone at home in the quiet, and really think things through. Did you feel like that?
100% I'm that way. That's still who I am today. Like, even, my wife understands that. My kids understand that. Like, I just need to sit with this for a second. I can't
Yeah.
just, I could just respond, but I need to think it through. I need to logically figure out how to respond to this. So even if, like, I'm having a disagreement with my wife or something, I'm like, let's just give me a minute. Let me figure out how to respond, because she's so quick witted. She's so quick with her words. She processes things so quickly. I'm like, okay, whoa, I need a second. But yeah, it's the same way. And that's why, being in the actuarial world was a good fit because of that. Here's a project, here's a problem, here's a situation. Okay, you're allowed to go back and figure it out and find the optimal solution. And I think that's the same thing that led to my issue with the trombone incident in band, or the issue of walking off the TEDx stage was, okay, I can't respond to this. I don't know what to do. I need a minute to figure out what the right response is, or how I even feel.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is so good. And then I do think this is making me realize that may be one reason why I felt like accounting was a good fit for me, because I was surrounded by other slower people.
Exactly. More and slower, but it's in a sense, it's a compliment, right? Because you want the right answer. You want to be methodical. You don't want to just spout off something that might not be right or wrong, because as an actuary, as an accountant, we're paid to be correct. Like, that is the bottom line. We need to take the information, take the data, take the numbers, make sure the balance sheet all adds up. We need to be correct. And so there's the expectation that you'll take the time that you need. And I think one of the things that I realized, I don't know if this is true for you too, one of the reasons why I'm drawn to podcasting, which obviously you're hosting your own podcast, why I'm drawn to speaking, which, you do some speaking, is this idea of, because we're a little bit slower on our responses, or we're more methodical on that. The way that I reconcile that is, doing the podcast, doing the speaking gives me permission to speak. And what I mean by that is, like, I'll go to a dinner party or something. I don't know if people actually have dinner parties, but you know what I'm saying. You go to, you're hanging out with a group of friends, and I could sit there all night and not say a word. Not because I'm upset, not because I don't have anything to say. It's just that I don't need to blurt in there, or I don't have the need to do it, or I'm not quick-witted enough, or whatever. I'm perfectly content, but I don't say anything. And my wife might be like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm perfectly fine." But I'm not speaking. I don't, unless somebody were to say to me, "Hey, Steve, what do you think about that?" If they give me permission to speak, I'm all over it. I got a million thoughts. I got all kinds of things to share. And I think that's the same thing with, like, podcasting and speaking for me, is that, some people get into speaking because they love to talk. I think some people get into speaking like me because they need permission to speak. Somebody says, "Hey, let me give you an hour for you to come on the stage and share with us your thoughts." Somebody says, like you, "Come onto the podcast. We'd like to hear your thoughts." You've given me permission to speak. And so I think the connection there is, I think part of that is because I don't process as quickly as other people do. But part of that is, I want to wait. I want to make sure somebody actually wants to hear what I have to say. I'm not going to just butt my way in.
Right. You're not the guy in a meeting who just says stuff for the sake of saying stuff.
No, but unless it's really critical to the conversation, I'm not going to. Or unless somebody says, "Okay, now you're on the agenda for this," or if they say, "What do you think?" Yeah, here we go. Boom, have it. So I was trying to connect the dots there between, I think there's an element of that's related to the slowness of responding.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting, though, because when you get out into the real world, I'm doing air quotes right now, and you're surrounded by, well, not surrounded by, because as an actuary, you are surrounded by other actuaries, generally speaking. But then when you're operating in the midst of other people who do process differently and who just operate differently, then we start to think, oh, wait a minute, am I supposed to be like that? And because I'm not, there must be something wrong with me.
100%. And I think that's why I struggled, because, I would rise up through the ranks and I'd get to a level, and then I'd get offered these opportunities at different levels, where you're intermingling with, the leaders of other areas. So you're working with marketing leads and HR leads and all those kind of things. And I just never really liked that. And I loved the strategic conversations, but I think part of it was that they just thought so differently, they acted so differently, they responded so differently. They had conversations so differently that I just felt like these aren't really my people, and I think I struggled in those ways.
Mm-hmm. And obviously,
and then the last 7 years, my
you're
career actually moved into human resources, and that was a whole nother story.
But so talk about that a little bit, Steve. So once you were in human resources, how did you feel once you were in that environment? Because you obviously did well in that environment. Did it just take more energy?
Yeah, it was a struggle. I mean, I don't know how many of your listeners have been in the corporate world and that sort of thing, but you can probably relate to it still. So picture actuaries, spreadsheets, data. I was working in investments, so we all had like 6 computer screens of all the different markets. It was intense, but nobody's really speaking, unless we have, hey, we need to do a trade in Japan, and but nobody's really speaking. You're not having really conversations. You're certainly not talking about personal stuff. Like, it's intense. You got stuff to do, and unless you walk out of the building or into the building with somebody, you're not really getting to know them, right? And we're mostly working through lunch, so it's all just. And people would come to the actuarial or the investments area and be like, there's 50 people here, nobody's talking. They're like, it's so quiet here. Yeah, isn't it great? And the ones that have any noise issues we'd have noise canceling headphones on in addition to that, right? And so that was my world for 20 plus years. And then I took a role in human resources doing data analytics, but it was in human resources. And I walk in every day, and I'd be one of the first ones in there, and the first person would come in and they'd tell the story about their dog throwing up on the carpet or something, I don't know. And then, 2 more people would come in, so that same person would repeat her story about the dog throwing up on the carpet. And then, more people come in, they tell the story again. I'm like, I'm so tired of this dog throwing up on the carpet story. And they have crayons set out and all kinds of these things. And they're doing all these different events, and we're having lunch together. And it's just it's beautiful, right? It's very relational, but it's just so different. And I'm like, I just got to get my work done. What's going on here? We're all hanging around chatting. Don't we have work to do? So it was a very, anytime you've been in one situation where you're comfortable, like in this, small goldfish bowl, and now you're in this big aquarium with all these different kinds of fishes, it was a struggle for sure. And it really was. I mean, I did it for 7 years, a couple of different roles in there, but it was a struggle all the way to the end, trying to fight that and figure that out.
And it was an open working environment too, right? So you didn't really have a choice but to listen to the dog throwing up story several times.
Well, that's what it became. And that actually became a source of the anxiety. So originally it wasn't, it was just cubicle world, right? Cubicle world, where everybody's just talking. And then the last couple of years, it moved into this open office environment. That's what it was going to be, was open office, which, if you don't know what that is, basically it's just a couple tables in this big wide open room. There's no walls, no nothing. And you're all just working on your thing, and it's just like mass chaos. And the idea is it's meant to be this entrepreneurial sort of feel. And if you're that kind of person, oh my gosh, it's amazing. People are talking on the phone, and there's a whiteboard going on, and people are playing opera music, and everybody's coming in for coffee. And it's just this cool, fun vibe that you picture, all these, cool kids in their blue jeans and their button down shirts and all these kind of cool things. But when you're wired the way that I am, where I need it quiet, I'm focused on the spreadsheets, the analytics, the analysis. I need it quiet to focus on those kind of things. It takes me an hour just to get deep enough in to be able to actually do some work. And so with all that chaos going on, that really added to my issues.
Oh, that's so good, because, excuse me, often I think in the work environment, people will think, oh, this is the right way of doing something, and not really recognizing that there's no right way, right? Which leads me to, the unright thing, your book, but everybody operates differently, and that's not a bad thing. We want that to be the case, but it makes me think about, so my coach, Kristen Sherry, who's the one who developed one of the tools I use, she talks about how when she was in the corporate world, the expectation was that she be collaborative, and she didn't want to be collaborative. And she was questioning, okay, does it mean I don't like people? Am I not a nice person? What are these things? But she was more of a thinker. She would have all these ideas, and she wanted to think things through, but she didn't want to talk to a bunch of people about it. Right. And so it was it was viewed as kind of a bad thing. But when she recognized that about herself and the fact that, no, wait, I don't actually enjoy being collaborative, and she owned that and, released the fact that she was supposed to be, then she figured out what her thing was. So it's just interesting how we just have this general expectation that everyone enjoy this open environment where we hear people's stories about their dogs, 8 times.
Right. And I love that story about her because it's true, because so many of us, even if we're feeling that, like we want to be part of the team, we want to be accepted. So we're going to pretend like we like that. Like I would say the dog story people, the people that were chatting all day long or whatever, I bet if you were to ask them, they'd say that they thought I loved being in that environment. Because, you're trying to be part of the team. You don't want to be a bad apple. You're trying to fit in. And so you put on a good facade. And that's what you do. And kind of the same thing in the open office environment. Like I was trying to put on a facade that, oh yeah, I'm cool. Hey, yeah, that's cool. But inwardly you're just dying. And I think then it comes to a head. And I love that your coach figured that out soon enough, or was willing to at least admit that soon enough to actually make a difference. Because I think I could have made a big impact in that role if I could have, I tried to be honest with the superiors, but if I could have been really honest, if they were really honest, if we tried to accommodate and kind of really figure out that thing out together. But the fact that I kind of stuffed it, the fact that they didn't recognize other people's needs just led to the point where you just, you couldn't make it work.
Right. And led you to being the safari dude. So,
yeah, exactly.
And I'm sure you did appreciate the dog story the first time, right? And then was a part of you, Steve, that questioned, wait a minute, do I just not like people? What's my problem? Why can't I hear this story again?
You hit it right in the nose. Like that was what I started, that whole self-doubt that comes in was like, I thought I was a really nice person. I thought I really liked people. I've always considered myself to be a caring, compassionate, unifier, community builder kind of person. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm, pardon my French, but maybe I'm an asshole. Maybe I'm because you don't know like what's wrong. Nobody,
right.
Because this drives me crazy. Now all of a sudden I hate all these people, even though I didn't hate the people. I just hated what they represented. I'm like,
right.
This is terrible. And I hated going to work. And I'm like, this is awful. What's wrong with me is, of course, how I would process it. And boy, they all seem like they're having fun. They all seem to be loving each other. They all seem to be getting along. It must be me. And, and yeah. So you start wondering, maybe I'm not as good of a person as I was. Maybe I'm the one that everybody talks bad about behind their backs,
Yeah. Although no one was probably even noticing you. No offense, but really, they were just concerned about the dog.
Nobody even noticed. Wait, we have an actuary? No, I think, they love me. We had good interactions. We had all that kind of stuff, but that's the sort of the self-talk that you get. And I think that's, for me at least, and I think for some people that resonate with the book, for me, that's grounded back in those middle school, early high school days where I had no confidence. I was short. I was scrawny. I was a nerd, never had a girlfriend, never really was successful at sports, so you kind of have this thing where, you're not one of the chosen at the school. And so right. And growing up with the family situation that I had and all these kind of things, I just felt so much less than. And so I used to assume when I would see people laughing in the hallway, just about anything, even people I didn't know, I assumed they were laughing about me. There's no reason for that logically, but that's where my mind went. And so I carried that with me throughout my whole life. So if I would see people in HR, laughing during a meeting or whatever, even though there's no logical evidence for it, you can tell me till you're blue in the face that, not to think this way, but I still had that part of me that was thinking, oh, they're probably laughing at me. And I think I carried that with me my whole life. And as I've shared that story, other people have said I've felt versions of that same thing.
Yeah. It's incredible, isn't it? What we carry through throughout our lives. And we don't even recognize it or even consider the fact that other people might be thinking the same thing or concerned about the same thing, thinking people are laughing at them.
And that's been the most amazing part about this journey the last couple of years is, and I know it's so cliche for everybody to say, I felt so alone, but I did. I felt so alone. But now over the last couple of years, sharing either something from the book or something from stage or just conversations like this or whatever, amazing how many people say, I felt the same way too. We're not in this alone. There's a lot of us that are feeling this. And so I think the more that we can find those people that we can talk to about it, and have been in similar things, the more we realize maybe we're not as weird as we think we are. Maybe we're not as unaccepted as we think we are. Maybe we're okay, and maybe we have something more to offer than the world seems to let us believe.
Right. Because we can absolutely be surrounded by people and feel entirely alone. And I think most of us feel like that a lot of the time, or at least some of the time, or have felt that way at some point.
For sure. And that's a good chunk of my story. And again, sharing on stage, when I say, I'll say once in a while, I'll say something like, it's amazing how many people now tell me too, when I say I had this great life on paper, but inwardly I was miserable and I felt really alone in that. People are like, that's my story. And it's very, very common. I think we have an epidemic of loneliness, I think, especially I would say in our professional ranks.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Steve, let's talk about how you decided to be. You shared a little bit about your journey and why you decided to be a motivational speaker, but can you talk a little bit about how you became the safari dude and why your topic is life being an epic adventure?
Yeah, well, I really decided to get into speaking a little bit more. I'd say early 2023. It hasn't been that long, maybe a year and a half ago or so. But I wasn't really sure what my voice was. I started doing all these free talks everywhere, and I would talk to any group about anything, whatever they wanted me to talk about. I'd prepare 40 hours to do a free talk at a chamber or some dumb thing, and but I couldn't find my voice. I was just like, and what I mean by that is I couldn't figure out, what do I have to offer the world? What do I have to say? And so that's when I had started writing the book right around that time too. And that's when I realized maybe this is what I need to say, is just tell my story. Because even the book wasn't going to be a memoir. The book was going to be this deep dive. I'd done all this research. I had like 70 citations. I'd written like 60,000 words, this self-help kind of deep dive into what really causes happiness. And I just kept thinking, this isn't the book I want to write. I don't want to be an expert. I'm not an expert. I don't want to be perceived an expert. I'm just a guy who lived this journey and tried to figure some things out. And so, I started writing the book. That was very cathartic, and I started learning some things about me. But then I had a couple of conversations with some trusted speaker friends, and they just asked a million questions, talking about my story, my background, my experiences, what I've been through, and then also some of the life experiences I've had, what I've done in my life, whether it's work or outside of work. And that's where this idea of the safari dude kind of emerged from that, because my story is really about learning to realize that life is this epic adventure. It's the whole dash mindset, right? It's, what are you going to do between birth and death? We have this dash, if I'm understanding it correctly. So
Yep.
and embracing my story is really one of moving away from kind of life happens to you to grabbing it by the horns and saying, what kind of experience do I want to have? It doesn't mean you're doing all crazy things, but it's just really grabbing the agency that says life is an adventure. What kind of experience do you want to have? So there's that part of my story that, seemed like something people needed to hear. And then the fact that I've been on 4 different trips to Africa, a bunch of different safari excursions, that seemed like a nice, great way to package what I had to say. So that's where the safari dude emerged, was taking what I've learned in my life, what I've learned from my research, to inspire people to really live life like it is this epic adventure, but then packaged through the lens of an African safari.
I just love that so much. And often I know when I was in my real job, normal job, whatever, oftentimes I would want to escape my normal life by going on vacation. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I don't want to have to escape my life. I want to enjoy all of my life, not just on weekends and when I'm on vacation, right? Which is what I think you, similar to mm-hmm. what you're saying. Why can't your entire life be this adventure? Why does it just have to be when you're on a safari in Africa?
That's exactly what it is. And it doesn't mean you're going to have as exciting of times in your regular job, but realizing that really that life itself is the adventure. Like we have these moments, right? These moments between birth and death. The park closes. We're done. What do we want to do in the middle there? And yeah, I think one of the things that I've shared is that so for myself, I was like living most of my life like the kind of stuff that you just have to do. You're kind of wishing time away because in 2 weeks I've got a vacation. So you're kind of just wishing time away. You're just getting through the day to day. You're just doing the minimum in a sense or whatever, just to try to get to that next good thing, and realizing, yeah, that was 2 weeks that I just of my life, of my adventure, that I just lost. And so the invitation is for people to start seeing those day-to-day things as part of the adventure itself. And again, it doesn't mean that you're all, hands up, through the top of the Jeep and wind blowing through your hair, the adventures of a vacation. But there is something about life itself just being the epic adventure that we can grab onto, that we can realize this is this work, this conversation, these moments, this is part of the adventure. This is part of the human experience.
And throwing up into your trombone was a fantastic part of your adventure, right? Because that's such a great story. You were able to incorporate it into a book, right? Falling downstairs is a great part of the adventure. And so often we're trying to escape that stuff when that's some of the good stuff. It doesn't seem good at the time, but later, right. It's fantastic.
It is. It's like, people go camping and it rains the whole time and it ruins the weekend. But those are the camping trips that people talk about. Remember the time it rained the whole time and we were, whatever. But during the time, it kind of stinks. But that's part of embracing the adventure. When you fall down the stairs, it sucks. It's embarrassing. You might get hurt. But embracing that, yep, this is it. And this is the human experiences. There's ups and downs, highs, lows, knowns, unknowns. Like, this is what it means. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. And embracing it as part of the experience. And that's where, looking through the lens of an African safari is helpful too, because, we haven't all fallen downstairs. We haven't all, thrown up into trombones, but we've all had those situations where it feels like we've been mugged by baboons, right? And that's where, you can tell a story about being mugged by baboons or surrounded by elephants or close encounters with gorillas. You can tell these stories of things that actually happened, and then invite people to kind of see themselves, realize that that's part of their life. There's times when they feel surrounded by elephants, mugged by baboons, or the great times where they see the cheetah running at full speed. And I think that's why I love about the safari piece, is that you can kind of bring in these cool stories that are actually memorable, that drive people to think about, their feeling at work where they feel like they're surrounded by elephants or whatever.
Right. And it's not like when you go on a safari, it's all roses and rainbows. I mean, it's hot and you're sweaty and you have to, when you shared the story about walking to see the apes, you were thinking, oh my gosh, are we actually even going to see apes? This whole thing kind of sucks, at least at the time. Right. But that was part of it. That was part of what made it all worth it. Okay. So a couple things I would love for you to share. And I know that we're running low on time and you know that I can keep you here for a long, long time, but I won't. So one thing that I loved is the story you shared about the woman who was wearing a white outfit on the safari and how she wasn't on the right safari. Like it was great that she was on a safari, but she wasn't on the right one. So can you share that?
Did you share the story? Yeah, sure. So part of this is talking about, one of the things that I encourage people is, you got to get the right peeps in your Jeep. And it's important when you're on an African safari. It's important in our life. It's important as a leader. And the point of the story is really about, it's not about if people are good people or bad people. It's about if they're aligned with the mission that you're on, or in your personal life, the right people are the ones that support and encourage you, even though they might not have the resume or the experiences. So it's not about defining people who are right or wrong. It's about who are or that are good or bad. It's about, are they the right people? Are they aligned with your mission? And so, I use a story from Africa where we had this gal who, we're in the Great Migration on the Serengeti, which is like 2 million wildebeest, 1 million zebra, all making their way across the Serengeti at the same time. Unbelievable experience. And we had to stop the trip because she was crying. And I went to kind of figure out what's going on over there. Why is she crying? And it turned out, she had this nice white safari outfit that was getting dirty. And everybody else in the Jeep was like, what is going on? We stopped for this, we're burning daylight. We gotta, keep seeing all these things. And we stopped because somebody's outfit is dirty when in fact, we're all dirty. We're all covered in mud. And we had talked about this before. We had talked about the fact that, this is July, it's Tanzania, it's Africa, it's the dry season. Like, it's all going to be dusty the whole time. And so, everybody was super frustrated. But the reality is she's an Instagram influencer, which, some people kind of roll their eyes at a little bit, but she makes some good money doing it. And her vision for a safari was to take pictures of herself in her nice white outfit in front of the animals so that she could post them and increase her following and her revenue and all those kinds of things. Which the point I try to make in the talk is that is a perfectly legitimate safari experience. Like that's an experience. A lot of people do that intentionally to have that. The problem is she wasn't on the right safari. She shouldn't have been on our trip, right? It's a legitimate safari. Like our experience of wanting to see the Great Migration is a great mission. And her experience of wanting to take selfies in a nice white outfit, that's a great mission too. The problem is that we weren't aligned. And so the issue with getting the right peeps in your Jeep, surrounding yourself with the right people, isn't necessarily about, is this a good person, or is this is this somebody who's good? Are they somebody who's impressive? Do they have a good resume? It's about aligning yourself with people who have the same mission, that they're on the same mission. And in our personal lives, that means finding people that support us, encourage us according to the experience that we want to have, versus trying to drag us into some different experience.
I love that. And that's, excuse me, that specific instance is one of the reasons why you talk about the peeps in your Jeep, right?
Mm-hmm.
That particular experience. Yeah. I love that so much. And
Absolutely.
then,
that's a funny story, right? People can kind of relate to it. I mean, maybe not directly, but they all, we kind of all know those people who are like, really, seriously, that's what you're thinking right now. But I think the challenge, the invitation for people is, just because you disagree with somebody, you think you see them, as less than or whatever. They're not. They just have a different set of experiences or goals or whatever. So the invitation is to stop judging people based on if they're good people or bad people. We do so much of that in our world. I think the invitation is to say, well, they're maybe they're a good person, but they're not the right person for the experience that I'm trying to have. That's a very different look on somebody than it is to just cast them out as a bad person.
Right. And if someone else that was on your particular safari had been on a safari with a bunch of people wearing white, those people would have thought, oh my gosh, who is this schmuck? Why is he so dirty and gross? And I certainly don't want him in my Instagram photos.
Right. Or I mean, that's a great way to think about it. Like, or if I had wanted to, if my goal for the safari was to see as many animals as possible, like the Great Migration would have been amazing. Like that's really what I wanted. And if I was on the trip where they all went in November, where, it's the kind of the end of the rainy season, there's no dust, it's all lush green, it's just beautiful. And they're just going around, to seeing like one animal an hour, taking these cool selfies, and they're getting out of the Jeep and taking selfies in front of the trees and all this kind of stuff. I'd be like, what is happening? This is terrible. And they'd think I'm the wrong peep because I just want, let's go, let's see animals. And they're all doing this other kind of trip. So yeah, I would have been a mismatch on their ideal trip.
I just want you to share one other story. So and then I have a couple quick questions and then I will let you go. But
sure.
I love the story about the kids playing soccer because I absolutely related to all of that. And anyway, go ahead, just tell the story.
So we were driving through the mountains of northern Rwanda. It was actually the night before we went to see the mountain gorillas. And we noticed this group of kids that were playing soccer in this field below. And I told the driver, I said, let's stop the Jeeps. I want to go play with those kids. And he said, well, we can't because we're on schedule. They're expecting us at the hotel. They're going to have dinner ready for us. And we have, the right thing to do is to stay on schedule. And I kind of beat him down a little bit because I said, you don't understand that the part of the experience that we want to have includes having these spontaneous interactions with local residents there to really try to understand what is life like in this part of the world. Because we had met with some different people at schools and different places where it was kind of pre-programmed and it was good, but it wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't, people that weren't expecting us to have these conversations. And so the driver said, we can't stop. I said, we want to stop. And finally, I just kind of beat him down and reminded him that, we're paying the bill and everything. And so I got him to stop. And then we sent our translator down to make sure that the kids were comfortable with us coming down. And we went down there. There's 12 of us went down there. We had some soccer balls and air pumps left over from our humanitarian work. So we brought those down. We gave them to the kids. And we just spent like 15 minutes just kicking the ball around, smiling, laughing, talking to the kids, learning their names through the translator, all of these things. And the kids would hold our hands, which is kind of customary in that part of the world. And it was just this beautiful, heartful 15 minutes of laughter and just like, I can't believe this is happening. And it was amazing, just wonderfully, wonderfully amazing. And at the end of it, they actually gave me one of their homemade soccer balls, which is still, if we were on video, you'd see it behind me here, but it's still like my most treasured possession. And it was just a sweet, sweet moment. And the reason I bring it up in the talk is because it's one of those unright things. Because the right thing to do in those situations, of course, get to the hotel on time, have dinner there, the wait staff is expecting you, and that's the right thing to do. But sometimes the happiest things that we can do, the most life-giving things that we can do, are when we do the unright thing. Because what we did wasn't wrong by any accounts, but it wasn't right either. It's kind of this gray area of the unright thing. By most people's standards, this was not the right thing to do, but it was one of those moments that created so much life. And so I use that story as a kind of a transition into what can we do in our lives that are those unright things that are going to bring us more life. But it was just one of the most amazing moments of my life.
Oh, I love that. And I'm sure it was hard for you to beat down the driver, especially as a people pleaser. And there was a big part of you that thought, oh no, people are going to be waiting and this isn't right. But I just so appreciate that you did it anyway.
It was hard. And that was exactly what I was struggling with, because you want to honor the hotel, you want to honor the wait staff, and we made sure that we had the driver call ahead, tell them we were going to be late. I made sure we took care of them in terms of a better tip and apologized vehemently and all those kind of things. But ultimately, it was maybe a 20-minute total detour. It wasn't a huge we're going to be there 3 days later. But yeah, it was hard, and that had to go against my natural grain of, yep, here's the agenda, here's the schedule. But frankly, by that time, we'd been in Africa, we'd been doing humanitarian work in Rwanda for about a week or two, and you realize that the American scheduling system, the American itineraries, kind of blow up in Africa a little bit. There's the saying that Americans have all the watches and Africans have all the time. I mean, when you go there, one of the things that I tell a team is manage your expectations. Flights may or may not be on time. Dinners may or may not be on time. It's just sort of this. So by that much time into it, I think we were all a little bit more, relaxed.
You did the unright thing in a respectful way.
Mm-hmm.
And then it created a memory.
No, well, thank you for saying that. I think so too. I mean, we tried to be as respectful as we could. We didn't stay there for hours, and even though we could have. So I think, yeah, it doesn't mean you have to be this contrarian going through life, always doing the opposite of what everybody needs you to do. You can still manage it within your own personality, but there's room there to do the unright thing for sure for all of us.
I love that. Thank you for sharing those stories, Steve. Okay, so I have one question for you, and then we'll let you go. But what would you tell the younger version of yourself, knowing what you know now?
I would say, choose your own experience, which is sort of another way of saying define what your right thing is to do. And what I mean by that, I guess, really is figure out as early as you can, and sometimes it's hard to figure it out when you're young, but as early as you can, what do you really enjoy? What do you really want out of life? What kind of experience do you want to have out of life? And have the conversations with people that can actually help you find that. Because one of the things that I realized looking back especially is the weight or the influence of all of the external voices in our life, right? The defaults we inherit when we're kids, the expectations of other people, the idea of what we should do, what we're supposed to do. There's all of these voices telling us who we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to think, how we're supposed to act, what we're supposed to believe. And they're well-intentioned usually, but it makes it very difficult for us to really look at the world and say, what kind of experience do I want to have? And I think that would be the challenge to my younger self, and to challenge to any younger self or any older person, is to really look at different pieces of your life and say, what kind of experience do I want to have as a boyfriend or a girlfriend? If you're somebody going into high school, going to college, what kind of experience do I want to have in college? Do I want to have kind of a partying experience? Do I want to have a studious experience? Do I want to build lifelong relationships? Do I want to, I mean, there's no right answer. The answer is whatever you are, but being honest with what kind of experience do you really want to have? To me, it would be a critical piece at every stage of life, and that can change over time.
Oh, that's so good, Steve. Okay. One other question. Where can people find you?
Well, most of my social media I've closed up shop on, which I know people are like, how can you be closing up shop on that? You're a speaker and an author. And for me, it's just a matter of managing my community and really, finding where my people are and building community. So I'm no longer on the big channels that most people think of. Really, where you can find me is information about me and my contact information at stevefredlund.com or LinkedIn. That's where I'm really, really active. And if you want to stay connected, I do have a monthly newsletter and that kind of thing. So my contact information is out in those places, my email, my phone number. Anybody's welcome to call or email. I don't keep that protected. So feel free to set up a chat.
And The Unright Thing is everywhere, right? It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. It's on bookshop.org. It's on, there's links on my website as well. But yeah, any of the big retailers will have it. It is in some stores, but that all, of course, depends on where you're located. But Amazon is always the go-to place.
Right. Do people go to stores anymore? I don't even know.
They do. I mean, I do sell books through bookstores, so they are reloading. So apparently they are. The only time I've gone to bookstores is to give them copies of my book. So I don't know. My wife goes to the bookstore.
I don't know if I actually shared this with you or not, Steve, but when I walked into Lisa's event, your book was sitting there, and I didn't know anything about you at that point. I didn't even know who was speaking that day other than Lisa. And I saw your book because it has this picture of you. How old were you in this picture?
I think I was
on the
8.
cover of the book. Oh my gosh.
I think
I saw the book.
A school photo and I was scared to death.
Oh, it was just the best picture. And so I see this book. It's titled Do the Unright Thing. It has a picture of Steve at the age of 8, upcoming actuary, right? So it was just, so you have on like the 8-year-old glasses. And I thought, okay, I don't know who this guy is, but I need to buy this book. And so, yeah, if you just the cover itself made me want to buy it. I knew nothing about you at the time. So and now I have an autographed copy of the book. So Ooh. I'm especially excited about that. Okay, well, I am going.
But Sherry, before you go, I just have to say something because I told you, I've already told you this, and your listeners have to know this too. They probably already know that you are like the best audience member ever. Like we've talked about this, and I told you I got this one photo from the event where you are just dying laughing, and I tell you, as somebody on stage, like that is so encouraging. Not just to have somebody laughing, but I just love how you are like. It feels to me anyway. Like you are always fully engaged in the moment, fully engaged. Like if you want to laugh, you just laugh. If you want to cry, you just cry. If you want to be serious, you just be serious. And I just love, it's inspirational to me to watch you and just how fully engaged you are in the moment. So I want you to know that I took more out of that than just, oh, you were laughing. You've given me kind of more permission, more freedom to be myself in those emotions too. So thank you.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Steve. And you have made me realize, because when you sent me that picture, that maybe that is something I should offer as a service to people, is just being in the front row at their presentations. So I guess I just want everyone to know that I'm open to that.
I would pay you. I can't pay you much, but I would pay you to be in my audience. It's unbelievable. It's so fun. You're so fun.
I would be happy to do that, Steve. I could listen to your presentation multiple times. I don't think I'd get sick of it. Thank you so much. I am so glad you're in my Jeep.
Oh,
and then I'd start doing, well, since I haven't been on a safari, it wouldn't really be very genuine.
Well, maybe
everyone would say, why do you have all these pictures of this guy? What's that?
I'm sorry, we're talking over each other. That's my apology on that. But yeah, so maybe we'll have to change that. Maybe you'll have to go on safari here pretty soon.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I am absolutely going on safari. Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you so much, Steve. I had so much fun. I'm so glad you're in my Jeep. I'm so glad you're one of my besties now and for the rest of my life. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you were here today. I so appreciate it. And thank you for overcoming the technical difficulties with me too.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. Thank you everyone for being here today. Follow Steve. Not physically, but like on his socials, buy his book, all the things. He's amazing. Go on one of his safaris. Don't wear white. And thank you everyone for being here today.
Thanks so much for listening to the Dash Mindset Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player, tell your friends, and leave us a review. Follow me on my social media platforms highlighted in the show notes, and get in touch with me at thedashmindset.com. Share the topics you'd like me to explore in future episodes. Thanks again for listening to the Dash Mindset Podcast. We'll see you next time. Design and differentiate your Dash your way and make today amazing.